In the last episode, we concluded with a bit of a cliffhanger. The Miller family, even though we thought we protected ourselves against this, was able to listen for new tasks created by my Way family. And that's because, once again, we're still using a public channel. So let's switch back. And yes, in task created, we used a unique channel ID, which is great, but it's still a public channel. We're now going to switch over to using a private channel. And do make sure that you import that at the top. And I can get rid of this one. Next, in your task list.view component, here we're going to open a private channel. So we say echo.private. Okay, but now, if you switch back, we've compiled everything down. Let's expand this. If I give it a refresh, you're going to see this new authorization error. So we give it a run, and yep, 403 forbidden. So what's the issue here? Well, think about it. We've now said we're going to broadcast to a private channel. And then in our view component, we tried to turn the dial, and we said we wanted to listen to that private channel. But are we authorized? Is there any place that we've declared who is authorized to access that channel? And the answer is no. So that's our next step. If we visit our channels file, yeah, you've probably seen this a number of times before. And if you didn't quite understand what it referred to, well, now you're going to get a crash course. Here is where you declare your authorization for a channel. So for example, we have, let's go back. What is the channel we submitted on, or we broadcast on? Tasks.theproject.id. All right, let's listen for that. But now let's take it in steps. So I'm just going to return true. Let's just imagine, no matter what, for this particular channel, anyone has access. You might try it, but if you switch back and we'll give this a refresh, it still fails. And that's because you are not authenticated at this point. So Laravel is expecting a user, a signed in user, but you're not. You're a guest. So sorry, a guest does not have permission to listen on a private channel. Let's fix that. Behind the scenes, I've run PHP artisan make auth, and that gives us some very quick scaffolding abilities. So here we'll do myself. I'll paste in my email and provide a password. Okay, we are now signed in. So if I switch back and open up the console, we should no longer see that. Okay, so at this point, everything should work. Add a task here, and that should be broadcast to anyone else who has access to this list. But yeah, of course, you don't want to hard code true. So for your project, you need to decide, given this data, how do we determine if the current user is authorized to view the project? So let's update this. Let's see. This is going to be the project ID. And yeah, you know what? It just depends. So we don't have anything set up right now. We could just say, well, the user with this email address has access to these projects. The user with that email address has access to those projects. And then we'll just check. So why don't we do this in 2 steps? First, we're going to do it very inline, very quick and dirty. And then after that, maybe we'll create a dedicated pivot table for declaring the participants in a project. So to start, yeah, we'll just say, if the user's email address is me, well, maybe the lists that I can access are maybe a list with an ID of 1 and maybe one called 3. And then we'll do another one. So if we have Jeffrey, or how about John at the Miller family, well, he has access to these 2 lists. All right, so we're just being quick and dirty here, declaring authorizations. Then at the bottom, we'll just say, well, we're going to look and see, is the project ID within that array? And then up here, we'll initialize it. All right, so imagine I'm signed in as Jeffrey at Laracast. All right, well, our authorization is, I have access to these 2 lists. So let's see, is the project ID in question within that array? If so, I have access. If not, I don't have access. So we'll stick with this, and then we'll switch to a table at the end of the video. Let's come back to Chrome, give it a refresh, and we're good to go here. But now let's go to that project with an ID of 2. And there we go. We see the authorization error. We don't have permission to listen on this channel. And of course, it's not lost on me. In real life, you want to prevent access to this page entirely. I only kept it public in this video just so I can show you this authorization error in effect. But now let's say I do have access to that. Well, if I give it a refresh, you'll no longer see it, which means this protects us Because what was the issue we had earlier? Let's try it out. We will log it out. Register here. We don't have a landing page set up. Anyways, who is this person we have? John Miller. So we'll say John Miller. And he's signed in. So we've already given him access to the project with an ID of 2. And yet, let's do the thing that we did at the end of the previous episode. Yes, he can listen on this public channel all he wants, but nothing's going to happen because we're no longer broadcasting on a public channel. But even if he were to try this, it's still not going to work because he's not authorized. This is the benefit of using a private channel. So now we have a better arrangement here. The Miller family, anyone that John has given access to, will get real-time updates, as you can see here. Didn't have to refresh the page. And you know what? This is always a little easier to see side by side. If you add a task, they can all see this in real time without refreshing the page, but nobody else outside of this group has access to that information. Okay, so that'll mostly do it for our review of private channels. If you'd like to stick around and just see what it might look like if we refactored this, at this point, this kind of leans more into general PHP territory. So you can be done with this episode if you want and move on. Or yeah, if you'd like, come along and we'll create a pivot table maybe for this. What if we add a new table here? So make a migration. And to be honest, there's many ways to do this. If you want to keep it very simple, you can add a basic text column where you add some JSON for all of the user IDs who have access. It's just a very simple way to do it. Or like we'll do here, you could even set up a pivot table. So why don't we say project participants will be our pivot table. And we'll call it create project participants table. So let's switch over there. Here, what would we need? Well, I need an integer for the user ID. So this user has access to that project. Okay, so let's go ahead and migrate our database. And next, it sounds like from our project, we need a way to reference all of the participants. So we could say something like this. Now, how would I say from the project, give me all of the users who are participants in this project? Well, that's a basic belongs to many relationship. So I could say return belongs to many user, and let's see how this turns out. So we'll expand this. PHP Artisan Tinker. I think we have a project. So we'll say app project first. And let's grab the participants. It fails. No such table project users. So the issue here is with Laravel, it's going to assume a basic convention for the pivot table name. If you don't want to do that, and we didn't in this particular case, then you need to override that. So here, we'll update this to project participants. Okay, let's exit out and do it one more time. Grab the project, give me the participants, and we get an empty array. Let's add myself. So app user first, I think that's me, yep. And we'll say project participants save me, and that should do it. So now, if we refresh and grab the participants, now I can see for this project, I have access to it. But that John Miller guy does not have access. Let's do him. So let's say project 2. So that will be the most recent one we created, right? And then John would be the most recent user we had. And we just want to say John should be a participant in this project. So project 2, participants. And we could do save, but we could also do attach John. Okay, so now let's get a fresh copy. View the participants, and there we go. John is in that project, and I am in the first project. So now think about it. If we have a project and we can access the participants, then all we have to do now is say, is the currently authenticated user included in that collection of participants? Easy. So let's head back to our channels authorization file, and yeah, we can get rid of all of this now. We have our project ID, but just like your routes file, you can use implicit model binding. And we'll say return if the project participants contains the given user. All right, so let's give it a shot. It looks like we're signed in as John Miller. We'll go to the console. Oh, we have a 500 error. We must have a little issue here. Argument 2 must be an instance of project, a string given. Our model binding didn't work. Whoops, sorry. These two names need to match up. All right, let's give it a refresh, and now that worked. John Miller does have access to this channel. However, what if he didn't? Let's come back, and we'll load up Tynker again. We'll find his project. And we'll say project to participants, detach, and John's user ID is 2, right? So we'll just say app user find 2. Okay, so now there should be no participants here, which means if John signs in and reloads, he's not authorized to listen on that channel. And don't forget, there's two separate things here. So you have the one layer of authorization that, of course, says Miller can't even see this project if he doesn't have access to it. And you would do that with traditional PHP middleware if you want. Anything would be fine. But we also need the protection on the client side level, and that's what we've been focusing on. So if you have any questions, leave a comment below. Otherwise, we'll move on in the next episode.